Hey guys, it's Christy Hendricks here with Change of Shift, and I have a really amazing guest with me today, and her name is Alene Nitzky. She has a service-based business, and I know that there are nurses that, some of you are thinking about having a digital product, and then there are others that are thinking of like a service. What kind of service could I provide? So for that reason, I've got Alene, and she's got a pretty amazing thing that we're going to get into. Let me first start out by just telling you a little bit about Alene. Okay, and Alene she's an athlete and a personal trainer and a registered nurse. She is an ACE certified health coach and an ACSM, American Cancer Society certified cancer exercise trainer. She's worked in critical care and outpatient oncology settings, and she maintains her certification in oncology. She is a Nightingale Award nominee for advocacy, and she's passionate about helping those who have been through cancer treatment restore their well-being. Alene has been speaking and writing about running and fitness and wellness and healthcare to various groups and organizations for more than 20 years. As an oncology nurse, she recognized the disruption to her patients' lives that cancer treatment caused, including their families' routines and their needs. So what Alene did is she founded Cancer Harbors to assist people in gaining more control over restoring their health and life after cancer treatment. Okay, so Alene, why don't you join us? Welcome in.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to talk to nurses because I went through the whole thing of going through school and starting in one area of nursing and moving to another area of nursing, and when things it felt like that just wasn't working for me, I had to find a way to make it work. And so I really enjoy sharing my story with people because I want people to know that you're not limited to just traditional nursing. So we'll talk more about that as we go on.
Okay, that sounds great. Okie dokie. So let's just start and tell us a little bit, just a brief history about your nursing career before you started your Cancer Harbors.
Okay, so I came to nursing later in life. I actually went to nursing school when I was 40. And before that, I had actually been in natural resources, which sounds like a really far from healthcare. But what I did was I studied health benefits of leisure, and ended up getting a PhD in that, in recreation, and taught exercise science for a while at the college level. I also coached. And so I have that background in education, but I'm also a runner. So I was interested in health and wellness. Well, what I ended up doing after I decided that traditional academia wasn't right for me, I started a business as a personal trainer working with people with chronic health conditions and trying to help them be more active and fit so that it would help with managing their symptoms and improving their quality of life. What happened was when I was working with those people, I was learning so much about the medications they were on and the pathophysiology of what their health conditions, that I felt like if I had a medical background or a nursing background or something like that, that I would be able to do a better job. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up going to nursing school. And from nursing school, my first job was in critical care. And I did that for 4 years, and I loved parts of it, and other parts of it I just felt really stressed out, and I just felt like I needed to move on to something else. So I took a position in outpatient oncology, which was actually in a hospital. It was a hospital-based infusion clinic. So I was giving chemotherapy and working with cancer patients there. And as I was working with them, I realized that a lot of their needs weren't being met. And a lot of them had to do with not having the skills or knowledge to restore their quality of life to where it was before they were diagnosed. So as I would be in there hanging bags of chemo, I would be talking with these patients, and I just felt like, wow, there's just so much that they have so many questions that aren't being addressed in doctor's appointments. And even, afterwards some of them get these survivorship care plans, but they're not really answering their questions. And I just felt like with my background and my set of skills, that this was the ideal time for me to start something on my own and feel like I could address that gap that we weren't addressing in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was going to ask you too. I was wondering how you got from personal trainer to nursing, and having already had a PhD. I'm like, wait, what? What happened in that time?
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah.
And I can see that progression, and that's helpful to know what happened in what order. Okay, so your service then that you offer as a nurse entrepreneur is Cancer Harbors, which is your website. And Cancer Harbors, your service is helping those cancer patients get through not the medical part, but like their living, their actual life. Is that right?
Yeah, because what they get great care of the disease, from the doctors. The whole medical part of it is about treating the disease, but there's the patient, and especially after they're done with treatment leaves all of these after effects and this fatigue, and just they need to recover, and it takes time, and they don't know what to expect, and the doctors don't really tell them what to expect. They tell them how to follow up.
Okay.
They tell that part. So what I do is individual coaching for people in that period of time after they finish treatment. I work with them as far as whatever their individual needs are to get their life back in order. And it can be a whole range of things. It can be just finding support in the community. It can be knowing if they want to do an exercise program or a nutrition program, but not knowing if they push themselves too hard, what's too much, what's too little, to find that balance, especially as they're recovering, because they don't really know. What happens with cancer is people forget that they can trust their bodies in certain ways. They feel like their body has betrayed them. And so it can take a while for them to learn how their body works after treatment, as it's recovering, and then as they move on.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because there are nurses that are watching right now that are saying, okay, well, I might not necessarily want to go into like helping cancer patients, but I do want to start like a service-based business. So what can you tell our audience? What are the first 5 steps that you would recommend for any nurse wanting to start a service-based business?
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, it's really important to don't discount the skills that you have. Nurses have amazing resourcefulness and resilience, and we learn so much in the situations we run into during nursing. And not only that, there are so many nurses who have other degrees or have had other careers, or you bring life experience and just personal experience to nursing. So don't ever think that just because nursing is the only thing that you've done, that's the only thing that you're qualified to ever do, unless you go back and get all these degrees or whatever. That's not true. You can do a lot with the skills you have from nursing. So that's the first thing I want you to realize, is that you're not limited. So think about, I'm going to look at my notes here because I made a few little notes for these 5 steps. But so I like for people to first write down, what skills do you have? What are the things that you bring to any situation, whether it's work or just in your community or in your family? And then the next thing is to examine your own values around what you like to do for work. Are you living up to those values? What's really important to you? What does quality of life mean to you? What's really important to you in a workplace? What do you feel that you need in order to sustain you so that you don't burn out, or that you don't feel like, or so that you do feel appreciated and that you feel like you're doing some good? So it's really important to really sit down and think through this. You know, what is most important to you, and how can your work align with those values? And then you can also ask yourself, do you see something that's missing? Are there gaps out there in products or services that are missing? Is there something that you see a need for that isn't being addressed? And whether it's in healthcare or not. So figure out if you have the skills, knowledge, resources, and support to be able to fill that gap. You may not have everything, and that's okay. But if you can see the things that you would need, then there's always a way to get to those things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's partnering with someone else who does have those skills that you don't have, or, you know, maybe taking some courses, or, you know, doing some continuing ed, whatever it is. Also, you need to ask, is there a need for that? So you need to go out and ask people, ask the people who you think would need that service. Would they need it? Do they feel they need it? What would they be willing to pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to other entrepreneurs, other business people, other nurse entrepreneurs, especially. Physicians, nurses, patients, whoever you think would benefit from that service or product that you want to provide. And then you also need to figure out what your options are if it's going to take you several years to get off the ground,
Mm-hmm.
because you're definitely not going to make money right away. You might not make money for quite a while, even if ever, but you have to figure out, how can I sustain myself along the way? Where will that source of support, financial support, come from? Do I need to work part-time, or do I need to find another job that's not going to burn me out, that allows me time to work on this? And then, part of that is also finding emotional, moral, social, professional support. Talk to people who really support you and help you feel positive, but also are realistic, who kind of bring you back to center, because it's easy to get idealistic about things and maybe not see something that you really need to see. So just rallying your support network is so important.
Yeah, and you know what? You touched on some things that are really kind of interesting, because I'm always trying to tell my audience too, and remind them that you need to, first of all, remember that you've learned so much, not just in your nursing career, but in maybe if you had a prior career or a different degree. Like my bachelor's degree isn't in nursing; it's in a different field. But you bring so much to the table, and I always try to remind them that you need to examine your interests, knowledge, your skills, and your passions. And I think you've just really touched on that. And then the other thing that you touched on that I'm always kind of reminding and talking about is that there are always going to be gaps. It's just knowing how to fill in those gaps. Recognizing what the gaps are and just knowing where can you get the resources, or how can I fill in these gaps. So it's not a project or a business or something. It's not insurmountable. A lot of it is really just having to do with trying to find somebody else to partner with that can help fill in those gaps. Or so Anyway, so now I know that you have a story, and I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, and it just has to do with what we were just talking about with nursing being something that you have a lot more than just nursing skills. And nursing is much more than just working in a hospital or a traditional setting. So the story I was telling Christy is that this just happened a few weeks ago. I was in the supermarket and I ran into someone I used to work with when I was back in ICU. It's been nearly 10 years since I've worked with her, but I hadn't seen her in a long time. And she said, so what are you doing now? Are you still in the hospital? And I said, no, I left about 4 years ago. I had my own business. And she looked at me and she said, so you're not a nurse anymore? So you're not working? And I said, no, I'm still a nurse. I'm just doing this on my own. I work in the community now.
Right. You're just working in a different way. You're just practicing nursing in a different way. And right. I had a similar experience. And actually, I think this has come up a couple of times for me, where I was working with patients. Actually, I left the hospital. I had left clinical nursing. I wasn't working with kids anymore. I wasn't working with moms or babies anymore. I was actually doing medical aesthetics. So I was doing laser and injectables, aesthetic injectables like Botox and fillers and all that kind of stuff, having a great time doing it. And this was in California. At the time, it was in San Diego. And you had to be a physician or a nurse to do that, right? So I had a couple patients actually, and I remember one specifically, she looks up at me, she's like, well, don't you miss being a nurse? And it almost like, it was like a dagger in my heart, like, I am still a nurse. So
a lot of people think that if you're, if you're not in the hospital in a traditional setting, then you're not a nurse.
Right.
And there's nothing further from the truth. Nursing is something that can fit into anything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone needs nursing care in
right.
some way, so it's, don't limit yourself to just a clinical setting. There's so much out there.
There's lots of ways to be a nurse. There are so many ways to be a nurse. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you so much. Okay, so now I have another question for you too. For a nurse that is kind of thinking about a service-based business, what would you say, what are the best marketing practices that you can suggest for her?
Well, for me, as far as marketing, keeping it local and small to begin with is a really good practice, because you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. Also, it's very expensive to do marketing. So you find as many ways to do it without spending money. There are so many ways through social media that you can reach out. And one of the great things on social media is that there are all these nursing groups. For example, nurseup.com is on Facebook. It's called nurseup.com, and it's an actual Facebook group. That, I would have to say, that was probably the single most influential group that helped me when I left the hospital and was starting to set up my business, because there are all these other nurse entrepreneurs in there who are just so supportive and so positive, and they're willing to share tips with you and support you as you grow. So I highly recommend that. And then there's another organization called NNBA, National Nurses in Business Association. I think it's nnba.org. And they are fantastic. They have all these resources. They have a conference every year. There are all these people willing to share their ideas, and you can save yourself so much time and money and mistakes by talking to these people who've been through it, and they want to support other nurses to get out there and do their own businesses. So as far as marketing, I highly recommend that you engage with these other people who are doing it, because they're really more than willing to help. So
Right. Right. And you know, that's kind of like the interesting thing about nurse entrepreneurs. It's not like nurses in some hospitals or some units where, you know, we always say, oh, you know, nursing, you know, nurses eat their young. That's not true in every unit. I mean, I've worked in units that were very supportive, but I have also worked in units where, yes, in fact, they do eat their young. But in nurses in business are so supportive of each other. I've really been kind of, you know, in my travels, surprised, you know, kind of almost, I guess I was expecting, you know, some territorial thing. And I really, that's not what I'm running into. I'm running into a really, really supportive group. And that's great. Now, I do want to touch on the marketing practices. And yeah, you can get into some money. I would suggest start with the free stuff first, you know, because there is a lot that you can do. And actually, you know, we can talk about, you know, tips and tools of the trade. But you know, I think the free services that are out there online, apps and software and stuff like that, you know, start with that kind of stuff. So do you have any favorite tips or tools that you would want to share?
yeah, well, I mean, you'll definitely need a website, of course. Um, you know, reach out to some of these other nurse entrepreneurs, and there are so many free websites out there. I mean, you can start with a lot of free things and
Right.
start small, and then, you know, if you get to the point where you're generating money and you're able to put something into hiring someone to make your website, you know, all spiffy and have a lot of bells and whistles, great. But you don't need that. If you have a presence and you have a way of being contacted, you can make a lot of things work. There's PayPal, there's, you know, Square, there are all these different ways to get you know, get money coming in. You don't have to spend a lot of money to have the basics to start your business.
Right, right. I think that, you know, like you were saying, I think if you have just like a simple basic website and a social media account, that's all you need to really kind of get started and just be able to show people how to link to it. I mean, you could start with a social media account, which is free, and from your social media account or page, you can link to your website. And it doesn't have, just like you said, it doesn't have to be some big fancy thing. It can be just, you know, just do it on your own. It's not that hard. And there are lots of resources too to help you learn how to build a website. But yeah, you can build a website yourself. If if I can build a website, I think anybody could. So yeah, start with the free stuff first. Doggone it. You did talk a little bit about networking groups, because I wanted to, you know, be sure that our listeners like knew where to go. So you talked about Nurse Up, you talked about the NNBA. Are there any kind of other associations for services for nurses that are wanting to start services? Any other places that you can point them?
In your community, I would start talking to some of the other independent healthcare providers, like physical therapists, occupational therapists, even people who aren't necessarily in medical clinical settings, but people who are massage therapists, you know, people who are in the community who do health related services. There are all kinds of networking groups. There are the meetup. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking
Meetups. Yeah.
meetups, and yeah, and I have gone to a few. For example, there are some groups here who they call, the one here is something like Clinicians and Comrades, and it was started by some physical therapists, and they have a whole bunch of people coming to these meetings once a month, and every month someone talks about their business, and it's just a great way to network and get the word out. So I would say look in your community. I think the biggest thing is word of mouth, and just talk to as many people as you can about what you do, because you'll be surprised once you start talking. They'll say, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, or I know somebody who's doing something like that. And if you just start connecting with these people, you will be amazed at the network that is out there. It's not just like you need to rely on healthcare people. There are all kinds of people out there. And there's community groups, support groups. For example, I talk to a lot of cancer support groups. That's really helped me spread the word.
Uh-huh.
So that's really where.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it doesn't have to be like nursing or healthcare related, because depending on what your product or service is, or depending in this case, what your service is, you might be reaching out to people that are not even healthcare related. I mean, I would think that in your business of helping nurse or helping cancer patients deal with their lives, you're reaching out to what businesses and organizations that may be helping them with just their day-to-day life. I mean, can you think of, off the top of your head, can you think of any businesses or anybody else that you deal with sometimes that aren't healthcare related?
Oh yeah. Yeah. All the time. I mean, just people, so for example, I have this class that I teach in town. It's an exercise and movement class, but what I do is I bring people in from the community who do things like stress management or psychotherapy or nutrition. And I know that is healthcare. Those are clinical, clinically related positions, but also I have, I get people in from recreation, people who teach things like Pilates or Rossiter or yoga, things that people like to do in the community. They're not necessarily all about fitness. They can be about just getting out and socializing and being out in the community.
Uh-huh.
But I have this network of people, and they all they have a chance to present what they have to offer to the group. I hope that answered your question. Maybe.
Yeah, that does. Yeah, sometimes you really, what I'm finding is you have to have kind of a sit down brainstorming session. And, when you've got your idea for your service, you have to kind of let your mind kind of go out really broad and think, okay, who could I collaborate with? Who can I look to for help? What are the kind of the little branches, or like if you take like a little web or something, to see how your service is going to relate to all these other businesses or other services and stuff. So you really have to kind of let your mind sit in front of a window and let your mind go free to get those, those ideas going. So now what doors have opened to you professionally since starting your business?
Well, I've connected with some nonprofits, a nonprofit organization here, and they are using my program for their clients. It's a breast cancer survivor service for support locally. So they are using my program. So I've been able to connect with people who need my services. And then in the community, I mean, I've been able to connect with, again, these people who provide other professional services, who refer people back to me. I would have to say that the doors that have opened have been more about being out there in the community where I can really reach the people who need my services. In the healthcare setting, it was a lot harder because you're limited in what you can do, what you can say, they're so, I felt really boxed in.
It's kind of rigid. It is rigid in traditional healthcare settings. You've got your policies, your procedures, and yeah, it's true. You're limited in what you can do and in what you can say. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it's just made it's so much easier to just be yourself and do what you see is right for a person. And of course, I'm always referring them back to their doctor or to someone, some expert who has the credentials. If it's something that I can't do, but I can do a lot of education. and a lot of referring people to the resources that they need, because that doesn't happen in healthcare. It's very limited in what they will recommend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, they're not so likely to say, hey, you know, maybe you should try this yoga class over here at this health club or something. They're more like, okay, well, let's get you into rehab, and, you know, so that we can bill your insurance, you know, when the person could use those services in the community. And, you know, who knows, maybe there are things out there that are even free for them.
Right.
And so that's, you know, as far as that, but I just feel like I guess it's more just feeling more autonomous, and really you get treated with a lot more respect. To be honest. It's, you know, when you're in that healthcare setting, it really is, you really are limited. And, you know, I just have to say that I just feel so much better, you know, being out in the community on my own,
Right.
because I get to call the shots, and, you know, it's, you know,
Well, you know what? Isn't that the nice thing about being a nurse entrepreneur? That's what I love about it. I get to be totally autonomous, and I'm the boss. I call the shots. I make the decisions. I do the planning in the organization. And there's a certain kind of personality that, you know, I really enjoy doing that. You also, when you make a mistake, you know what? You own that mistake.
right.
So, yeah, in that respect, it is very different from clinical nursing. But so did you ever think, back when you were like doing oncology and hanging chemo, did you ever think that you would be here today like this, like what you're doing now?
You know, I didn't think about it when I was doing that. You know, I didn't really have a vision of where I was going to go. You know, I was focused on what I was doing, and I was trying to learn as much as I could at the time. But really, you know, I listened to patients all the time, and I went to support groups to listen to their needs. So I think in the back of my mind, I always thought, well, you know, the original impetus for me to go into nursing was because I felt like being able to help people with chronic health conditions, you know, in my personal training business way back, I really wanted to be able to be more effective for them. And so what was happening, I wasn't consciously thinking about it at the time, but I was learning what I needed to learn so that I could apply those skills to cancer patients, and to be able to do, as a health coach, which is very similar, I would be able to go out and use my skills, my skill set, and my knowledge of oncology and just chronic disease from nursing, and be able to apply that. So I think somewhere in the back of my head, I thought I was going in a direction like this, but I just didn't have a picture of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, because now, I mean, in retrospect, you can see that path and just go, wow, it's really pretty logical how I went from this to that, to that, to this. Now I can see how I got here today. And it seems like that what's helpful is, like what we were talking about before, is when you can step back and look at all your interests and your skills and your knowledge and put that together, and you could sort of like almost map it out and just see, oh my gosh, you know, I think I was made for this. But you definitely had this mapped out career. You just didn't see it at the time. Right? When you're in the thick of it, when you're in the middle of it, you don't see it. But in retrospect, you just go, gosh, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Okay, so now let me ask you this one last question is, so how has your personal life changed? Without getting too, you know, into any nitty gritty or something, but whatever you'd like to share, how has your personal life changed from the days that you were maybe on the floor thinking, I don't know, maybe I'll start a business, to now today?
Well, I'd have to say that I definitely work more hours than I used to. because, I mean, having your own business, I honestly work right now. I work 7 days a week, and but I don't work a 12-hour shift. I can go for a run. I can take my dogs for a walk. I can eat when I want to, when I'm hungry. I can take a class somewhere, and I don't have to ask for time off. I can go to the bathroom,
Right? Yeah.
It's just so nice to have that flexibility. If I want to take a day off, I can. I'm going to have to make up for it. But, the reason I'm so busy right now is because of my book. But once I get that done, and I'll be, of course, I'll be marketing the book. There's always something to fill my
There's
time.
always something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I make that decision. I made the decision to work like that. And it's not that I'm being forced into, running my tail off all day long, and then, having to document everything. And, it's just, it just feels so much freer. And, I work from home, which is nice. My dogs love it.
And they've been quiet. So they've been good. I want to touch on something that you said just a minute ago, and that was that when you say, and you hear entrepreneurs say this a lot, I work more hours now than I did back when I was on the floor. But let me give my 2 cents worth, because my experience has been, yeah, I do work more hours. But you know what? It's because I want to. It's because I have to force myself to stop. My husband will come home and say, Christy, did you go out today? We have this beautiful, huge lake right out our back door. And I love it. And I have to force myself to leave my office to go walk down by the lake. But it's not because I have to, or because somebody's standing over me with a stick. It's because, doggone, I love what I do. It's so much doggone stinking fun. Yep. But it sounds like you kind of experience the same thing.
Yeah, I do. I work because I love it. And, I have to listen to myself. I have to, check myself every so often. Am I getting enough, time away? Because I usually know, because I become less productive. I'll be sitting there staring at the computer, just going, oh, I can't think today. Okay, I need to go do something else. And so it's nice to be able to do that when you recognize it. But I definitely, I put a lot of hours in, but it's a labor of love, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay. So now the other thing that I want to mention too is you have a book coming out. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your book?
Okay. My book is, I'll just tell you the title first of all. It's called Navigating the C, which letter C. A nurse charts the course for cancer survivorship care. And what it is, it's a story about how I came to develop my programs around cancer survivorship. And what the book does is it looks at the healthcare system and all the stakeholders in it. So patients, cancer patients, caregivers, people who are friends or friends of people who have cancer, just your average citizens, nurses, physicians, healthcare administrators, policymakers, legislators, even nonprofit organizations, all these different stakeholders. And what we're all doing right now as far as cancer survivorship and how we work with people who have a cancer diagnosis. And what I'm doing is I'm taking a look at that, pointing out some of the shortcomings, and then suggesting solutions, things that each of those groups can do to make the whole process of cancer treatment and recovery less traumatic for the person who goes through that. And so it's largely, it has some stories in it, but it's looking at these different elements of the system and putting them all together and saying, what could we each be doing that could help this? Because right now we're waiting for something to happen with healthcare. We don't know what's going on with healthcare reform, what's going to happen in the near future. But these are things that we can all do now, regardless of what's happening with healthcare. So that's one part of the book. Then the book has a lengthy appendix where I talk about the background and basically the theory behind how I developed these programs. The 3 programs are Cancer Harbors, which is a comprehensive program of it's education and skill building for people for self-care and self-advocacy as they recover from cancer and as they go through follow-up care. It also works with people who are getting treated for advanced cancer, so that means they're in ongoing treatment. The next part is called Fierce, which is it's more of a movement and physical activity class I started here that is community-based, and it helps people learn about different types of movement therapy that can help them feel better and improve fitness and recover from cancer treatment. And finally, the last part of the appendix is a program that is I'm still developing, but it talks about how we can all prepare, prevent, and prehabilitate. So it's prepare, prevent, and prehab in case of a cancer diagnosis, so that there are a few things that we can do in our lives and things that we need to know that will make that whole process of cancer, a cancer diagnosis, or someone you love being diagnosed with cancer, a lot less difficult and traumatic than it is. And so that's what the book is about.
Mm-hmm.
And it has just a sampling of the Cancer Harbors program, which is on my website. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to my website and if you want to talk to me, send me an email and I would be happy to talk with you sometime, set up a phone call with you budding nurse entrepreneurs and just chat.
Now, did you think, when setting up or starting your service, that then at some point you would be going on and writing a book?
At first I didn't, but then when I wrote the Cancer Harbors program, which took me about 1.5 years, as I was trying to figure out how to get it out there, I tried some different ways. And I finally realized that there's so much of this. It's more than just for cancer survivors, what I wanted to say. I mean, there are so many things about self-advocacy and taking care of yourself that people need to know, whether they have cancer or not. I felt like a book would be a good way to reach this bigger audience.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who are interested in pursuing it further could just go through my website and my service.
Okay, so you've got this, so you have your service. Now you're going to have a book. Now, is that book are you going to be up on Amazon?
It will be, yeah.
Okay, so you're going to have a book on Amazon. Okay, so I mean, that's helpful to aspiring nurse entrepreneurs that want to, start a service-based business, because once you start your business, there are a lot of other little pieces that can go into it where, you might not think, oh, I'll be writing a book someday. And then there are other things that you could be doing too. I mean, did I ever think that I was going to write a course someday, or to write a book, or to organize events, or whatever it is? So a lot of doors do open up to you just in the practice of, running your business. You talk to other people, or you get into your business and you go, gosh, I need to do this. Just like you were talking about when you were setting up the program, you realize that, hey, this needs to be out there in a form that somebody can consume and read about it. And so it kind of took you even into another aspect of business. I just would hate for a nurse to think, okay, well, this is my business and I only can be, say, a health coach. And that's my service-based business. But as your service, you can, there's so many other things you can do under that umbrella of, like in your case, helping cancer survivors or cancer patients. So there are just so many opportunities out there. Okay, so now before we go, I want to be sure that everybody knows your website. And so tell us your website and your email address, or how we can get in touch with you.
Okay, my website is cancerharbors.com. So Cancer Harbors, one word, .com. Very simple. And then if you want to reach me, you can just write to info@cancerharbors.com. That makes it really easy. That email goes directly to me. So that's how to get a hold of me.
Okay. Well, excellent. Alene, it was such a pleasure to have you with us. And if anybody is interested in that service-based business, listen to Alene's amazing advice that she had for us today. And if you're interested in even something like, cancer related, something like that, I'm sure Alene would be most helpful to you. Also, if you could just email her, and she'd be happy to help you out there too. So, all right. So this is Christy Hendricks with Change of Shift, and thanks for joining us today.